And I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we're grateful to Martin Griffith for the report with a detailed description of the outcome of his trip to Syria and neighboring countries, and we'd like to pay tribute to the active and constructive position of the new head of OCHA on the Syrian issue. We also listened to Amani Kaddour. We welcome the first successful humanitarian action of the WFP in Idlib carried out cross-line. We understand the difficulties involved in the process of agreeing on the shipment of this convoy to the warehouse in Sarmada. At the same time, we call on all involved parties not to be satisfied with the results, which are modest and a one-time outcome. It's a modest outcome because the WFP mission has been completed only partially. In the absence of a mechanism to distribute the assistance, the task has not been completed. The assistance has not reached those that need it. It continues to be stored on the warehouse under the supervision of unnamed but so-called reliable partners. We would like to understand whether these partners are included in the list of 80 NGOs that are published in the latest report of the Secretary General, or not, or they're not in this part of this list. How can we be sure that the humanitarian assistance will not be stolen or actually sold to those who need it? We'd also would be interested to ask Mr. Griffith about the fate of the joint convoy, UNICRC and the Syrian Red Crescent. Is there any chance of its actually heading to At-Tareb and Daret Isa, as was agreed with Damascus back in April of last year? And what efforts are being made by the UN to achieve this? Madam President, we would also like to strongly express our position on the need to establish reliable cross-line humanitarian deliveries in the Northwest. You can't resolve this through half measures. This is an extremely important task. It is enshrined in the unanimously adopted Resolution 2585. Well, regarding this task, the Western members of the Council, as well as we can tell, continue to show a lack of due enthusiasm to this task, and they're in no hurry to put pressure on the terrorist groups operating under their auspices in Idlib. At the same time, they are absolutely unforgiving towards Damascus for a single delay in issuing authorization to UN workers to operate on territory under its control. This is regarding the issue of the equivocal attitude of our Western colleagues to the legitimate authorities on one side and the remaining terrorists in Idlib on the other side. And they do not hold accountable those terrorists. The fact that according to the UNFPA, in that enclave, in the Idlib conclave, the number of early and childhood marriages is on the rise. With regard to the Idlib enclave, the rights of women and girls appear to be of much less concern to our colleagues than, let's say, the rights of those women and girls in Afghanistan. Once again, we are facing double standards. Madam President, we note with satisfaction the normalization of the situation in the Dera province, in particular in the region of Dera al-Balad. This was possible to reach thanks to the efforts of Damascus and with the assistance of Russian troops. Peaceful civilians are returning to their homes, and unimpeded deliveries of humanitarian assistance are flowing into the province, both through the UN and through the Syrian Red Crescent. I don't think we need to hype this up any further. This topic, the Syrians have other much more important issues to deal with. In particular, we continue to hear in the Council from the representatives of a number of Western states about the so-called targeted impact of the sanctions introduced against certain Syrian officials, and about the fact that these measures in no way affect the lives of ordinary Syrians. At the same time, in August, the U.S. aid published a very curious report analyzing the situation in Syria during the COVID-19 period, covering the period from July 2020 until July of 2021. And I want to quote a few passages from this report. The U.S. sanctions, which came into effect in June 2020, significantly contributed to the devaluation of the Syrian pound and the spiraling economic crisis. Another quote: the combined effects of COVID-19 related restrictions imposed from March 20 to May 2020 and in June, along with the U.S. Caesar sanctions, led the exchange rate to devalue even more. A third quote: in January 2021, the U.S. administration announced the continuation of sanctions against Syria to reduce flows of funding to the government, which led to even further devaluation. Still another quote: coinciding with the implementation of the U.S. economic sanctions and the end of a 2-month lockdown, inadequate food consumption rates kept increasing sharply. Quote number 5: trade was also further limited by U.S. sanctions, resulting in an increase in criminal activity and unofficial trade in the black market instead. And one more quote: COVID-19 precautionary measures and fuel shortages, currency depreciation and economic sanctions, importation constraints, and high transportation costs, all this contributed to a general rise in the prices of key agriculture inputs and products starting from March 2020. Now, these published figures and data by USAID have demonstrated the real scale of the impact of anti-Syrian sanctions of the United States on each individual Syrian. And some of our European colleagues aren't far behind in their sanctions, which complicate lives of ordinary citizens, while our European colleagues are trying to shift the blame to the Damascus authorities on this, in spite of clear statistics and international appeals, including the appeal by the Secretary General of the UN. Madam President, we are also extremely dismayed by the situation in the IDP Camp Al-Hol. The main residents of that camp are women and children. From the beginning of the year, 74 premeditated murders have been committed in that camp. The situation risks spinning out of control. Now, against that background, according to information that we have, there are active efforts at radicalization of its residents. A similarly dangerous situation can be seen in the Al-Tanfa region. We'd like to remind everyone that the responsibility for everything taking place in these camps is borne by the occupying authorities. We're also very concerned about the water supply issue in the north of Syria and Euphrates region. The problem with access to drinking water is now being felt by 70% of the population. The grain harvest is in serious danger. The problem is not only a reduction in the volume of the river Euphrates, but also in continuing disruptions at the water pumping station Aluk, which, just as many other infrastructure facilities in Syria, requires serious repairs and subsequent maintenance. We call on donors to pay attention to that and provide the needed support to the UN in implementing the necessary provisions of Resolution 2585. So, to sum up, we would like to commend the new approach to accountability by the Secretary General of the UN regarding the humanitarian situation in Syria. However, we have a lot of work ahead of us to make sure that in the winter the Council does not run into problems in extending the cross-border mechanism to deliver humanitarian assistance. We call on the UN and all delegations of the Council to get to work on ensuring smooth cross-line deliveries, and also to make a contribution in normalizing the humanitarian situation in Syria and strengthening its territorial integrity. Once again, we'd like to stress that there's nothing automatic on this issue contained in Resolution 2585. Everything will depend on progress in implementing the provisions of that resolution. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation.